24-year-old Bulgarian influencer Andrea Ivanova drew global attention after reportedly spending more than $49,000 on repeated lip filler procedures in pursuit of extreme cosmetic changes. She's publicly shared complications following treatments, including severe swelling, discomfort, and being unable to fully close her mouth. Doctors warn that excessive filler can stretch tissue, increase infection risk, and permanently alter normal facial function. In 2018, a 34-year-old man in Hunan, China attempted to fake his own death by sending his car into a river as part of an insurance fraud scheme meant to send his family a payout of about $145,000. But fully believing her husband had truly died, his wife later drowned their 2 children before taking her own life. Authorities said she had no knowledge of the plan and had been under severe emotional and financial stress, including heavy medical expenses tied to a child's epilepsy treatment. The man resurfaced days later and turned himself into police, telling investigators the scheme was driven by debt, turning what began as a fraud attempt into a fatal chain of unintended consequences. This may be the most disturbing Valentine's Day gift of all time. South African trophy hunter Marilies van der Merwe drew backlash after killing a 17-year-old bull giraffe during a Valentine's Day hunt her husband reportedly paid for. After shooting the animal, she cut out its heart and presented it to her husband as a Valentine's Day gift, later posting photos with it online. The images quickly went viral and sparked criticism worldwide, but she defended the hunt by saying regulated trophy hunts generate permit fees that go toward wildlife management, anti-poaching efforts, and local land conservation, and that older, non-breeding animals are often selected to reduce pressure on habitats. In 2020, a Dollar General employee with diabetes was fired after drinking a $2 orange juice at the register when she began feeling symptoms of diabetic shock. The company said she violated policy by consuming merchandise before paying for it, labeling the act as grazing, even though she later paid for the drink. The dispute escalated into a lawsuit, and a jury ultimately awarded her $277,000 in damages, turning the incident into a widely discussed example of strict workplace policy clashing with a medical emergency. 23-year-old Arizona man Christopher Todd Eric died following a mental health crisis and was mistakenly recorded as unclaimed due to a clerical error, according to his family's allegations. Years later, his mother said she recognized his preserved body inside a public anatomical exhibit, where it had been plastinated and displayed without her knowledge or consent. She's since pursued legal action seeking to recover his remains and challenge how unclaimed bodies are processed, sparking debate over consent, medical displays, and the ethical handling of human remains. A Connecticut man survived a horrific workplace accident after his arm became trapped inside an industrial furnace for 3 days. As circulation failed and tissue began to decay, he reportedly tried to amputate his own arm using a saw blade after noticing the smell of rotting flesh, but he lost consciousness from pain before he was able to finish. Concerned when he failed to show up for work, a friend contacted authorities, and rescuers eventually freed him, preventing a more than likely fatal outcome. That was when 25-year-old Erica Mae Butts was hyperventilating in court after receiving a life sentence for the death of 3-year-old Serenity Richardson in 2011. Prosecutors said the girl was repeatedly abused inside a South Carolina home, including being struck with a belt several times after wetting herself. When she was finally taken to the hospital, doctors documented extreme bruising and severe injuries across her body, and she later died from the trauma. Serenity had been left in Erica's care while her mother was trying to relocate. Another woman living in the home, Shanita Latrice Cunningham, was also charged in the case. Both women entered guilty pleas to homicide by child abuse and were sentenced to life in prison. They responded by collapsing in the courtroom, making a scene and crying hysterically before being dragged out. In 2006, comedian Bill Maher sparked backlash after attending a Halloween party dressed as Steve Irwin, wearing a khaki outfit with a fake stingray barb through his chest just weeks after Irwin's real-life death. Irwin had died that September while filming a documentary when a stingray's barb pierced his heart, making the costume feel especially raw to fans and the public. Maher later defended it as dark humor, arguing that risk comes with working around wild animals, but critics called it disrespectful and too soon, turning the outfit into one of the most controversial celebrity costumes of the era. A 49-year-old man in Romania caused a devastating accident in 2016 while cutting firewood with a neighbor after the two had reportedly been drinking together. Authorities said he mishandled a running chainsaw during what witnesses described as joking around, striking the 53-year-old victim directly in the groin. The man was rushed into emergency surgery with catastrophic injuries, but doctors were unable to save his floppy Johnson. Investigators treated the incident as a reckless accident rather than an intentional attack, a grim reminder of how alcohol and dangerous objects can quickly turn a fun night into a life-altering tragedy. Futoshi Matsunaga was a Japanese serial killer who turned psychological control into a weapon, forcing victims to torture and even murder their own family members through threats, isolation, and extreme brainwashing. Operating in the late 1990s, he targeted vulnerable households, took control of their finances, and used staged punishments to break people mentally until they obeyed him out of fear. Investigators later revealed that several killings were carried out by victims themselves after prolonged coercion, creating a chain of violence where family members as young as 5 years old were forced to turn on each other. Several bodies were dismembered and destroyed to erase evidence, leaving little physical trace until a survivor escaped and alerted police. Matsunaga ended up being sentenced to death in 2005, and the case remains one of Japan's most extreme examples of serial manipulation. This photo shows 15-year-old Preston Porter Jr. reading a Bible as he's led by rope toward his own execution by a lynch mob in Colorado in 1900. He'd been held and tortured for 4 days, beaten until he finally confessed to killing a white girl after police told him his father and brother would also be lynched if he didn't comply. Still a child, Preston was denied a trial and handed over to a crowd that had already decided his fate. He was tied to a stake and burned alive in public as excited spectators watched. Despite the coerced confession, his age, and the brutality involved, Preston was never posthumously exonerated. No official apology was issued, no conviction was overturned, and no one was held accountable. On November 13, 1982, Duck Koo Kim fought Ray Mancini for the WBA lightweight title in Las Vegas. In the 14th round, Kim was knocked down hard and the fight was stopped. Minutes later, he collapsed from a massive brain hemorrhage, fell into a coma, and died 4 days later at age 27. Then, just a couple months later, in early 1983, Kim's mother died by suicide after traveling to the US and struggling with her son's death. Just a few months after that, referee Richard Green also took his own life after reportedly falling into severe depression, overwhelmed by guilt and public blame for not stopping the fight sooner. The bout became one of the darkest moments in boxing history and directly led to major safety reforms and the elimination of 15-round title fights. In 1977, unemployed Indiana man Tony Karitzis kidnapped mortgage banker Richard Hall after blaming him for the foreclosure of his home. Tony strapped a sawed-off shotgun to Richard's neck, rigged with a dead man trigger so any sudden movement could fire it, and held him hostage inside the Meridian Mortgage Company for nearly 3 days. During the standoff, Richard was forced to walk outside in public and even stand through a live press conference with the gun still pressed against his neck. With negotiations failing and Richard's life constantly at risk, police ended the siege by shooting Tony through a window, killing him instantly as Richard survived unharmed. On December 11, 2002, 22-year-old Alan Menzies murdered his best friend, 21-year-old Thomas McKendrick, inside his home in West Lothian, Scotland. Menzies had become obsessed with the film Queen of the Damned, watching it more than 100 times, and later told police he believed the character Queen Akasha was visiting him and instructing him to kill for immortality. When McKendrick came over that morning, Menzies attacked him with knives and a hammer, claiming the violence was triggered after McKendrick insulted Akasha. After killing him, Menzies drank McKendrick's blood and ate part of his head, stating this was the necessary process to become a vampire. He then placed the body of his best friend in a wheelbarrow and buried it in a shallow grave, where it remained undiscovered for the next 6 weeks. In court, prosecutors revealed Menzies had a long history of serious violence starting at age 14, including multiple stabbings. He literally told the court, "If you don't murder somebody, you can't become a vampire." Menzies received a life sentence with at least 18 years before parole eligibility, but in 2004, less than 2 years after the murder, he was found dead in his prison cell. DJ Carey, a former Irish hurling legend, was jailed after admitting he spent years faking a cancer diagnosis to scam friends and contacts out of nearly £350,000. Prosecutors revealed he sent staged photos showing what appeared to be medical tubing in his nose, later exposed as an iPhone charging cable taped to his face. He claimed the money was urgently needed for treatment, exploiting sympathy and trust while continuing the deception. The scheme collapsed when victims grew suspicious, and authorities confirmed he never even had cancer at all. Carey pleaded guilty to multiple fraud charges and was sentenced to more than 5 years in prison. A man once spent nearly 5 months locked inside Rikers Island without realizing he could have walked free at any point for just $2. Court records later showed a judge had ordered his release only a week after he was arrested for a nonviolent offense, setting an absurdly low bail, but his lawyer never told him. With no one informing him of his status, he remained trapped inside one of the most notoriously violent jail complexes in the United States, a place long plagued by assaults, gang activity, neglect, and inmate murders. By the time the mistake had been discovered, months of his life had already been lost to one of the most dangerous detention systems in the country.